Hidden behind the grandeur of Persian palaces was a world few discuss. Young men, chosen for their beauty, who served the great king as companions, attendants, and sometimes intimate partners. These male concubines challenge our modern view of Persian power, revealing a court where dominance included the possession of all forms of beauty, male and female alike. Their presence wasn't a contradiction, but a display of the king's absolute authority, where every luxury, human or material, was his to command. To understand this, we must set aside modern biases and step into the mindset of the ancient world, where the king's desires reflected imperial might. The king's collection of beautiful people was a statement. Nothing was beyond his reach. This forgotten chapter reveals the complex interplay of power and intimacy behind the glittering facade of the court. By bringing these stories to light, we gain a deeper, more honest perspective on the nature of power and humanity in the ancient world. The Persian Empire was the world's first superpower, stretching from Libya to the Indus, uniting dozens of cultures under one king. The royal court was a moving city of thousands, dazzling with tribute from every corner: gold, jewels, exotic animals, and notably, people. The king's palaces were marvels of architecture designed to awe and intimidate all who entered. Life at court was governed by strict ceremony. Access to the king was the highest privilege. In this environment, favor was more valuable than gold, and the king's desires shaped every aspect of court life. Male and female concubines were part of this luxury, living symbols of the king's dominion over both public and private realms. Their presence reminded all that the king's power extended into the most intimate corners of human existence. What was a male concubine in the Persian court? The answer is more complex than it might first appear, revealing a world of power, beauty, and strict social codes. More than just an object of desire, he was a privileged yet precarious figure in the palace hierarchy. His presence reflected both the king's taste and the intricate politics of the royal household. Greek writers described them as beautiful youths, often in their teens, serving the king in personal and intimate roles. These accounts, though filtered through foreign eyes, offer glimpses into the lives of these young men. Their existence was an open secret, a recognized part of court life and imperial splendor. Everyone at court knew of their presence, yet their stories were rarely told outside palace walls. The king's collection of beautiful young men was a demonstration of his ability to command the best of everything. It was a symbol of his wealth, power, and refined taste, admired and envied by others. These young men were not ordinary slaves. Once chosen, they lived in luxury, received education, and were set apart from common servants. They learned court etiquette, arts, and sometimes even politics, preparing them for a life of constant scrutiny. Yet, they were property, with no freedom to leave and no say in their fate. Their privileges came at the cost of personal liberty, and their fortunes could change in an instant. Their role blended companionship, service, and intimacy, living art, attendants, and confidants all in one. They were expected to be ever-present, attentive and adaptable to the king's moods. They were expected to be charming, skilled in conversation, music, or dance, and always pleasing to the king. Their talents were cultivated to entertain and delight, making them essential to the court's daily life. While intimacy was often part of their function, it was intertwined with their duties as companions and entertainers. Their relationships with the king could be complex, involving both affection and obligation. Their value was defined entirely by the pleasure and comfort they provided to the most powerful man in the world. In the end, their lives were shaped by the desires and whims of the king, leaving behind only faint traces in the grand tapestry of Persian history. Male concubines were more than private companions. They played vital roles in the daily life of the court. As personal attendants, they served the king's wine, managed his wardrobe, and performed trusted tasks. Proximity to the king meant influence. Their closeness made them confidants, privy to secrets and able to subtly shape opinions within the palace. During ceremonies, their beauty and refinement added to the spectacle of royal power. They entertained with music and dance, reinforcing the king's image of divine majesty. But this proximity was dangerous. A fall from favor could mean instant ruin or worse. Their influence was personal, not institutional, and depended entirely on the king's affection. They had to balance charm with humility, always vigilant and obedient. Their lives were a constant performance, where a single misstep could be fatal. In the Persian court, beauty and danger walked hand in hand. Becoming a male concubine was rarely a choice. Boys were sourced from across the empire as tribute or spoils of war. Governors and satraps sought out the most beautiful youths to win royal favor, while captives from conquered lands were selected for the king's service. Boys from regions like Ionia and the Caucasus were especially prized for their looks, adding to the court's diversity. Once chosen, they underwent rigorous training, learning Persian language, court etiquette, music, dance, and conversation. Their former identities were stripped away, replaced by the polish of palace life. They were fed rich foods, dressed in silks, and groomed to perfection. For many, castration was a brutal part of this transformation, marking them as palace property and ensuring loyalty. Eunuchs could not father children, eliminating any dynastic threat. This physical alteration bound them irrevocably to the king and the palace. The making of a concubine was the ultimate act of royal possession. Both male and female concubines in ancient Persia were chosen for their exceptional beauty. Carefully selected to meet the highest standards of the royal court, they lived in luxurious confinement, surrounded by opulence but also by strict rules, their fates entirely tied to the king's favor and whims. Female concubines, however, could gain real power by bearing royal sons. Motherhood offered them a path to influence and even security. The queen mother, often a former concubine herself, was a formidable figure at court, wielding significant authority and respect. Male concubines, especially eunuchs, had no such path to lasting power. Their influence was personal and temporary, ending as soon as the king's affection faded or his attention shifted elsewhere. The female harem was a vast, highly organized institution with its own hierarchies, rules, and internal politics. In contrast, male concubines formed a much smaller, less structured group, often lacking the same sense of community or protection. Male concubines often moved more freely in the court, able to interact with powerful figures and witness important events. They served the king in both public ceremonies and private moments, sometimes acting as confidants or trusted aides. Yet this visibility also exposed them to direct rivalry from ambitious courtiers and shifting palace alliances. After the king's death, women of the harem remained as part of the royal household, often living out their days in seclusion, but with some security. Male concubines, on the other hand, faced an uncertain future, sometimes dismissed or left without protection. A few favored eunuchs managed to transition into powerful administrative or advisory roles, but most lost their value as they aged, replaced by younger favorites and left to fade into obscurity. Their visibility at court brought both opportunity and risk, as they were always under scrutiny and vulnerable to intrigue. Their worth was closely tied to their youth and beauty, making their positions especially precarious. The lives of male concubines were more fleeting, their time in the spotlight often brief and uncertain. Their influence vanished with time, leaving little trace of their former status. In the end, both male and female concubines lived in gilded cages, surrounded by luxury but isolated from true freedom. Yet the keys to power and survival in the Persian court were very different for each, shaped by gender, fate, and the ever-changing tides of royal favor. Daily life for a favored male concubine was a mix of luxury and anxiety. They awoke in lavish quarters, attended by servants, and enjoyed the finest food and clothing. Their days were filled with grooming, lessons in music, dance, and conversation, all to please the king. Every moment was a performance, lived under the king's constant scrutiny. A single misstep could mean the loss of favor and all its privileges. Their emotional lives were suppressed. Personal desires were always secondary to the king's. Proximity to the king brought both influence and vulnerability. Isolated from family and friends, their only meaningful relationship was with their royal master. Their comforts were real, but so were their chains. In the Persian court, even the most privileged lived in splendid servitude. The social status of a male concubine was a paradox, honored within the palace but often viewed with suspicion outside. Favored eunuchs could wield immense influence, acting as gatekeepers to the king and shaping court politics. Yet, Persian society, especially the warrior elite, saw them as effeminate and unnatural, a symbol of decadence. As they aged, most concubines lost their value. A few transitioned to powerful administrative roles, like the famous Bagoas. For others, dismissal meant a bleak future. Isolated, lacking practical skills, and unable to marry or start families. Many faded into obscurity, their stories lost to history. Their lives were shaped by the whims of the court, with little hope for a future beyond its walls. The glitter of palace life often ended in quiet exile. The fate of most male concubines remains a silent footnote in history. The stories of Persian male concubines have been largely erased, hidden by cultural taboos and the selective memory of history. These narratives were not just forgotten by accident, they were actively suppressed, pushed into the shadows by those who shaped the official record. Most of what we know comes from Greek sources, who often portrayed Persians as decadent and effeminate, using these depictions to contrast with their own ideals of masculinity and virtue. The Greeks, as rivals, had their own reasons for distorting the image of the Persian court, turning it into a symbol of excess and moral decline. Persian records, on the other hand, focused on victories, royal lineage, and the glory of the empire, not the private, complicated realities of court life. Matters of intimacy and personal relationships were rarely, if ever, committed to stone or clay. Later societies, shaped by stricter views on gender and sexuality, found the topic uncomfortable and often ignored or distorted it further. As new empires and religions rose, they rewrote the past to fit their own moral codes, erasing what did not align. The result is a kind of historical amnesia, where the lives of these individuals are relegated to footnotes if they are mentioned at all. Their stories became whispers, buried beneath layers of dust and silence. Our preference for simple, heroic narratives leaves little room for the complex realities of power, desire, and vulnerability that shaped ancient societies. We often overlook the messier truths in favor of legends. Remembering these stories restores a fuller, more honest picture of the past. It allows us to see the ancient world in all its diversity and contradiction. It challenges us to see history as it truly was, not as we wish it to be. By confronting these hidden truths, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the societies that came before us. The lives of male concubines remind us that history is made by all people, not just the victors or the powerful. Every voice, even those long silenced, has a story worth telling. Their stories, once hidden, offer a window into the true nature of power and humanity in the ancient world, inviting us to look beyond the surface and seek the deeper truths of our shared past.